Welcome, everybody. Thank you for that tonight, coming down. And so welcome to the meeting of the Governance Committee. There's no fire alarm planned this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass doors behind you and to my left, that's over there. And through the double doors onto the riverside behind you directly. And please muster over the river at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-destructive method they think is suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio live streamed by the Council's website. The Westgate Gardens gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass doors. Okay, so what item one on our agenda is apologies for absence. Andrea?
We have apologies from Councillor Alex Ricketts and Councillor Lee Castle.
Thank you for that. Have you substitutes?
We have Councillor Steph Dupe for Councillor Ricketts and Councillor Michael Dixie for Councillor Castle.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest by any members or officers?
We have two voluntary declarations from Councillors Dixie and Howes that they are members of Whitstable Harbour Board in relation to the first.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turnbull?
The Harbour Board.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, member of the Harbour Board too, only, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Okay, we've got some public participation tonight. Our speaker tonight, Chris Cornell, Councillor Chris Cornell, he's going to be speaking from his point of view as a chair of the Harbour Board's committee, but really as a member of the public. And he just wants to raise a few points for you to think about. And I think that'd be really helpful. And thank you, Chris, for coming along tonight. Appreciate that. We have the minutes of the meeting on the 13th of February. Can we agree those minutes just by general assent, unless there's any points you want to raise? Are we happy with that? Thank you for that. So we agree those minutes by general assent. Okay. Right. So the first one is to ask Chris to speak. Yeah. So, Councillor Cornell, can you have a chat with us? Thank you very much.
I don't think I'm having a chat. I'm talking for 3 minutes. Good evening, friends. I'm addressing you today as chair of the Harbour Board to encourage you to vote for the recommended changes to the Constitution. The Harbour Board is a statutory harbour authority and as a result is kind of something which is difficult to fit within existing council operations. Very much like if you're a chair of governors at a school and the Department of Education says there are one or two different ways in which you can operate as governors. Similarly, the Department for Transport establishes that there are one or two different ways in which essentially port authorities can operate. We are a local authority-led or a statutory authority, and as a result, there is quite clear guidance which comes from national legislation as well as best practice about how we should operate. What these changes to the Constitution are seeking to do is better align ourselves with some of that national guidance, particularly post the change from a committee structure to a cabinet model, where I think at the time it's fair to say the Harbour Board kind of didn't clearly fit everywhere. And so whilst very functionally it became a committee of cabinet, that created a number of problems, particularly when there are changes to the operation of the board. This is seeking to essentially better align the Harbour Board with the strategy, fulfilling the best practice which says that the Harbour Board should basically be 50-50 in terms of the local community and the authority. We are suggesting reducing the number of councillors and increasing the numbers of independent members. And it's worth saying that the quality of independent members that we get from Whitstable is historically always been incredibly high. From directors of finance from the London Borough Board to former chief executives of London authorities. At the moment, we have previous trustees of large universities. And as a result, what we're suggesting is basically giving the voice of Whitstable residents a clearer role in that. We're imposing some new safeguards to make sure that the local authority can be clearer about what financial risk it is accessing, it's exposing itself to over 10 years of the harbour life plan, and ensuring that there's a situation in which financial monitoring from the council and the harbour board will be retained. These are important changes to ensure that the harbour doesn't become a political football. As I'm sure that Michael will tell you, the success of the harbour over the last 20 years has in many ways been because it's focused on the operation of the harbour and the role it has in the life of the local community, and not one particular political opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cornell. It's very much appreciated that, and I think all of us welcome those words from the chair. Thank you. Now to ask for a brief update from Matthew Archer, just to sort of overview the whole of our package of this meeting, and then we'll deal with the proposals and seconding of our items in just a moment or two. So if I can ask you for an introduction, please, Mr. Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'll deal with the Harbour Board one first. I think very helpful introduction there. This has been led by the Harbour Board, so the proposals came forward and then officers were invited to comment on them, and then a second round of discussions took place at the Harbour Board where the final proposals were put forward that are in front of you today. I think a lot of the proposals do make good sense. The alignment of council with the Harbour Board and making it a council function, I think does sit quite well with our arrangements. Full council has to approve the strategic plan. It also has to take overall responsibility for the Port Marine Safety Code, and having natural delegation then from council through to the Harbour Board means that you then have that natural flow, and Cabinet can sit alongside that as the policy-making body for the council, and then you have this memorandum of understanding which is added as the additional recommendation between the Cabinet and the Harbour Board to make sure that the interests of the Harbour Board are looked after by the Cabinet when they're setting the budget, and the Cabinet equally will look after the interests of the Harbour Board in making sure that it has the ability to deliver its strategic plan on behalf of the council. So I just wanted to mention that one, and also to note the change in composition. I think that's perhaps the other one that's quite important to flag tonight. As the speaker alluded to, it's a change to 5 councillors and 4 independent members under these new arrangements. So you would have fewer councillors. The idea is that you would still be politically balanced. So you would have 2 Labour councillors and then 1 from each of the other groups as part of that arrangement. And if approved, we would take steps to recruit a 4th independent member who would probably be taken on after the summer by the time that process is complete. Did you want me to carry on with just briefly highlighting some of the other points, or should we come back to them after we've dealt with the Harbour Board?
I think we'll come back to them after the Harbour Board show. Is that okay? We will just propose in a moment, or I will propose in a moment and look for a seconder for the whole lot, and then we'll start talking from there. Is that a reasonable way to go forward? Okay, thanks. So I'm going to propose the changes to the Constitution listed in pages 14 and 15 of the agenda are recommended to Council for approval, and I would seek a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Dixie. That's fine. So in that point, we're open the debate on the harbour. So I think we just open it up to any comments from the floor on the harbour bit, and then we'll come on to the next bits as well, if I may. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. And there's not much I can add to what Chris and Matthew said. These are excellent recommendations.
Michael, sorry, could you speak into your microphone because no, I'm sorry.
Yep.
It might be a bit tricky. You've got-
Thank you. Yeah, there's not much I can add to what Chris and Matthew have said. The recommendations are excellent. Our harbour, I'm not sure whether you all know, is a national role model for municipal harbours. And its success has been largely due to the work the independents have done over the last 20, 25 years. And as Chris said, we've had some really high, excellent members, independent members, who do it for, was it £800 a year, is it? I think it's even less than that. Yes, so it's really a voluntary activity they take part in. And the more independence we can have, I think the even more successful the harbour will be. So please vote for these proposals. I'm sure you will.
Thank you for that. Councillor Carnac.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's good to see Whitstable Harbour Board becoming a committee of council and not cabinet. When we went through the governance process, moving to cabinet, you're right, Chair. It sort of floated around. It didn't seem to have a natural home. And although the strategic plan was always going through council, there was a bit of a sort of tussle over whether it was a committee of council or a committee of cabinet at that time. And I think now that we've sort of had time to look at that, it really makes sense for it to be a committee of council. And particularly, as Mr. Archer said, every councillor is actually responsible for Whitstable Harbour Board. And so we should all be involved in voting on that. One thing I would just like to suggest is that in reducing the size of Whitstable Harbour Board to 5 councillors, that we should have no more than a maximum of 2 cabinet members ever on that committee, on the board. Preferably, I think it should be the bulk of the members should be backbenchers rather than cabinet members. So I would like to ask that we consider that 3 councillors are always backbenchers, preferably 5 are backbenchers, but if that's not the case, that at least 3 are backbenchers and 2 maximum are cabinet members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So are you happy to get a steer from the meeting whether we need to propose that formally, or do you want to propose
Yeah.
that formally as an amendment?
Yes, we can. I'm happy to see how what other people think. Yeah,
Okay, and then we'll formalise it if there's a
if
consent
necessary.
to do so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so if there are any comments on that point to start with, and then we can work through any other points we need to come to. Any other points at all? Yeah, Councillor Prentice.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Carnac, actually, because I don't think there's a monopoly on experience depending on whether you happen to sit in the Cabinet or whether you happen to be not in the Cabinet. So people can bring experience, as our speaker was rightly saying, from all walks of life, from their professions and from their backgrounds. So I'd be inclined to agree with that proposal because I think it's a very sensible one. Also, it probably means that cabinet members' time is a little freed up as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, of course, that I think the general philosophy of certainly this administration, but many administrations, is to not actually have cabinet members on any committee. Actually, so that's a good point. Had you got any sort of technical points maybe to help with that, Matthew?
Not so much technical, because you can set whatever rules you like. Obviously, the more rules you set, the more restrictive it becomes in terms of your choices. And I know we have the challenge, particularly with this administration, of having lots of working councillors and different commitments. So trying to make sure you have the right councillors with the right availability is something that is important for us as a council. So to function well, sometimes more flexible is better because it gives you that. So just a practical thought about that. The other as well is there is a benefit, I think, in having some councillor involvement on the Harbour Board, to have that conduit between, cabinet involvement in the Harbour Board, apologies, just to have that conduit between the Harbour Board functions and the policy setting of the council, and making sure that they are aligned and that there is information sharing between the two bodies. That can be a useful, practical thing. But in terms of whether you cap the number of cabinet members on the Harbour Board, yes, there is. I can see some logic in that. It's just whether you want to impose that restriction on yourself or just have it as an unwritten rule. It's one for you, really.
Fine, that's fine. Any other thoughts by any other members? Councillor Turnbull, and I'll come to Councillor Howes in a second, if I may.
Yeah, slightly different, slightly subsidiary point. I agree. I would just say I'd support these recommendations. I think that they're really good, solid, really positive moves. And I also agree with restricting the number of cabinet members involved. I also think it's important to have representation from Whitstable, ideally Gorrell, I would say, on the board, but I don't know whether that's something you would stipulate specifically, but as you already said, it's about being part of the community as well, and to make sure that that link is protected. I think that's quite important. Thanks.
It's fine, thank you for that. Councillor Howes.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything which has been said. I think it's really important that there is the link with community. I think what's happened this year has shown that it can work. We've got 2 cabinet members on it, and they've acted as the conduit between the Harbour Board and the council officers themselves. And I think the work which has gone into this has been excellent. The way that partnership has developed and how the whole report has been put together. The fact that the Harbour Board put forward ideas, then it went to yourself, and then back and forth. And this whole thing has shown how things can be done so quickly and efficiently. So well done to everybody involved in that. I agree with Matthew when it comes to too many rules could create issues. So I'd be happy to have sort of unwritten rules. We've got the leaders tonight of all of the groups. Yeah, and I think if the leaders are aware of it currently, but these are sort of unwritten rules that if possible, no more than 2 cabinet members, if possible, somebody from Gorrell as well. I think that would be really, really good. So I don't think it needs to be formal. I don't know how that works for you, Matthew, if that's something we can do, but that's what I'd prefer. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to have that as a minuted suggestion, actually. That would be something we can refer back to.
Yes,
but as I say, my personal preference is I actually would much prefer that we didn't have cabinet members on any committee. But it's not as easy as that sometimes. But thank you. Go ahead, please, Matthew.
We will just need to remember the unwritten rules. That's the important thing.
You could just say where.
Yes. So we could write something into the terms of reference on a where practical basis. We could do that, so that it's not a hard and fast rule. Perhaps that's the best way to deal with it. Actually, yes, that would work well. And just to say on the question of Gorrell, we did used to have a stipulation that there would be a local ward councillor on the board, which is fine until you hit the point where it's difficult for that local ward councillor to attend the meetings. So again, I think if we just caveat it, it would work fine, and we could include it.
Councillor Dixie.
So I'm not quite clear what you're suggesting. Is it that there'll be a written advisory guidance that, where possible,
I think we would
both of these?
include something in the terms of reference that would just say where something around the composition.
So it is written as an advisory guide.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
very happy with that.
That seems to be quite a good compromise. I think it's common sense that we wouldn't want to do that. So I think that's really good. Are you happy with that, by the way? Yeah? Okay. Thank you for
Could I,
that. And,
sorry,
yeah.
could I just come back with one other point?
Sure.
I sense maybe limiting it to Gorrell might be overly restrictive. Just reading the room. So I don't know whether you would want to extend it beyond Gorrell. And
I
at this
wasn't
point, it
intending
becomes
to
more
be
complicated.
Gorrell. I think that's probably. I think it'd just be cabinet. You know, I think
Just the Gorrell restriction, but no ward restriction. Is that what? I think we're having
No,
two slightly different conversations.
I'm actually kind of reading this that the question was that we we wouldn't want 2 cabinet members. One of them might be in our current administration. We have a coastal brief, don't we? For that would be a logical addition to the Harbour Board. But another administration in 10 years' time may or may not have that. Who knows? But I think I'm quite happy with the concept that if we continue with the cabinet system, then no more than 2 cabinet members, should be considered as if you like, the maximum number or something really. And that would be a reminder to any leader. And of course, when we're setting the numbers up on committees, I know that the officers do keep us well and truly on steer, that we do think about that, quite rightly so. So I don't think Gorrell it comes into it at all, really, because there may not be anybody that can do the work from Gorrell. They may not be the best person either. Who knows? I mean, it's just much as living the ward, but they're not necessarily the right person for that committee. So, and if they are, then they would be on it, wouldn't they? So, yeah, but Councillor Prentice.
I think it's important to clarify that quite a lot of the land in the harbour is actually in Tankerton. So we do need to sort of have that minuted, I think, because we don't want to be too restrictive. Gorrell is clearly a very important stakeholder as a ward, but so's Tankerton. I'd argue that the whole of Whitstable is, in fact, the whole of the district is, because you could also have someone who's very knowledgeable about ports and very knowledgeable about harbours and the whole maritime industry in another part of the district. It probably would end up being someone from Whitstable as being an independent member, but my preference would not to be too restrictive. Thank you.
I think I'm happy with that. I'll just pull it together. There'd be a note to the effect that we should be mindful not to have an over-reliance on cabinet members on that board, and they should be born from as wide a area as possible, really.
All it will say is, in the terms of reference, where possible, there will be no more than 2 cabinet members, and we won't make any reference to the ward issues at all.
That sounds about right to me. Councillor Turnbull, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to get where you're going with this. I just think that I'm not saying it needs to be stipulated, but I think from a perception position, I think that local people would like to see somebody on there who is one of their local representatives, because in order to maintain that link with the community. So that's how I feel about it, to be honest.
Yeah,
That's all the reservations that you're putting forward about stipulating too closely, and I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah.
I think any leader would be well recommended to listen to the local people from Whitstable, with the people they put on their Whitstable Harbour Board committee. So I wouldn't be too keen on restricting too much, but they would have to be people that are trusted, and I think it would have to be almost certainly a majority, if not all, from the Whitstable area, I think. Yeah, okay. Sort of okay with that sort of note, I think is fine. If you're okay with that, covers the point from your Councillor Carnac. Yeah, that's fine. In that case, I think any other points on the general ethos or anything you want to clarify at all on the Whitstable Harbour Board stuff? If not, we'll move forwards. We just have sort of general assent that we're happy with that, and then we have a vote at the end like we did last time we've done these things. Are we happy with that sort of general assent that this is okay to go to the vote? Yeah? Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask Matthew now just to summarise now the second point on our agenda tonight. That's about the petitioning scheme, and then we have a little think through that together and see whether we're happy with it or we need to make some amendments or whatever. So Matthew, can you help out there, please?
Thank you. So the second set of proposals are around the petition scheme, and currently the e-petitions in particular, the e-petition scheme was amended such that you could only submit an e-petition through our own system. And that was amended 2 or 3 years ago following some concerns that petitions were being run on third-party sites without our sort of knowledge or understanding. So quite a lot of momentum and signatures gathered, and then the problem is at the point when they start to engage with us, there's already quite a lot of work done, and if the wording of the petition is perhaps either inaccurate or doesn't have a clear call for action for the council, then we can have a bit of an issue with that, and we have to work with the petitioner. So that was one of the reasons why we changed. Having done so, some of the impact of that on people who want to just launch something and test the water is that they're feeling that our system is overly restrictive, and they want to just have the freedom and flexibility to choose the platform that they prefer and then submit their petition to us. So there are pros and cons to doing that. Obviously, the main advantage is it's much more open. It gives the public more choice. They're engaging in public democracy on their terms, and they have control of that petition, which is something that they might wish to have. The downside for us is obviously that lack of awareness until they choose to engage with us. So we can try and promote that, and we would encourage people to engage with us. And the other thing is that sometimes when these petitions are then submitted, there's no clear correlation between the spreadsheet of names that you get and the wording of the petition. You have to accept in good faith that that spreadsheet that you're receiving and the names on it and the wording of the petition are combined, that they are undoctored, and that it is a valid petition in terms of the names that we then check. So it's one of those things where there's no perfect solution. We can either decide to have it tightly controlled under our own system, or have more flexibility and allow the public greater freedom in how they choose to engage and promote their cause. I would say a large number of councils do accept petitions from third-party sites, so it's not something that I would have huge concerns about if we adopted this. I just want you to be aware that there are some compromises that we would accept in doing so. The second recommendation is it's a minor one, but when petitioners come along with their 15 signatures to full council, and they have their 3 minutes to present their petition and explain the call for action on the council, that is then referred by the Lord Mayor to either Cabinet or the relevant committee, or sometimes to an officer. And there's no comment. And I think one of the learning points from the notices of motion procedure, where we then gave the leader or their nominee a short right to reply to the petitioner or the person proposing the notice of motion, as it is now with that particular scheme. It rounds off the debate nicely on the night, and just gives the person proposing a feel for what the leadership might think of it. And they could do the same, I think, with the petition scheme if we were to adopt a similar process. So it's a small amendment just to give the leadership the opportunity to address the petitioner and say a few words, either expressing their initial view or explaining what the process will be to consider the proposal if there are perhaps financial or policy implications attached to it.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I've got Councillor Sole first, please, and then obviously Councillor Corris and Councillor Bland. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy with both of these suggestions. I think it helps us to be seen to be more open and working with the public on things. I know Matthew's already talked about, we would put information on the website to help people. I think we really need to emphasise that if anyone is considering putting a petition together, you know, if they do contact Democratic Services, there can be some assistance perhaps in the wording so that they're not wasting their time putting together a petition that doesn't actually call for action. And perhaps we can have some, you know, examples on there of what a petition might look like, what it might consider, and obviously the information that we expect to see on there. And I'm not overly concerned myself if someone hands in a petition of 1,000 signatures, if we have trouble in identifying one or two of those signatures as being legit because they're on an Excel spreadsheet or something. I think if someone's got 1,000 signatures, well, that's as, you know, 800 would be good enough for me. So, so I think anything we can do to make it better is good, and I fully support these proposals.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Carr Ellis, sorry.
I'm very wary about e-petitions in general. As some of you know, I'm a menopause campaigner, and there's been a major menopause petition. I personally know someone who signed it 3 times, which sort of skews all the results, because you can then contrast it if one person is able to sign 3 times on change.org, which is one of the major third-party ones. I would be very, very wary about handing it over to a third-party site for that reason. Thank you.
Councillor Bland. And then Councillor Buckland to follow.
I've got a similar sense of caution, and I think the issue has got to be, if we're going to hand this over to third-party sites, how do we ensure that people are actually indicating with some degree of reliability that they are residents of the district? Because I think it's hugely important that the council doesn't get overwhelmed by some national campaign which isn't actually felt by residents of the district. So there does need to be some caution around how you do this, because some of these third-party sites are pretty national, they're pretty massive, and you could get easily overwhelmed by it. And I would have some caution about us accepting petitions that aren't really representative of residents of the district.
Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor Muckman, please.
Yeah, it's just to follow on really from what the other two have just said, and like regards to like AI, and it's going to be very easy for AI to write a petition, write a motion, do whatever, and then trying to work out if it's genuine. So I just think some sort of research or questions to your tech people to how to spot this and how to get over like AI petitions. That's it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor Prentice.
Unsurprisingly, carrying on from the previous 3 speakers, I think I am in favour of the principle of opening up opportunities to submit petitions when it doesn't, you know, automatically fit within the council's sort of structures as they sit at the moment. I am concerned about some sites not having the integrity they perhaps claim to have in terms of the democratic process, and we've heard a lot about foreign actors, shall we say, intervening in our processes, and I think that's going to remain a threat into the future. So I wondered if it was possible, and I appreciate this is additional work, but whether it was possible to have a list of approved sites that somehow have a sort of a gold standard, if you like, because the idea that people who aren't in this district, or maybe quite a long way from this district, have influence on what we want to talk about in this district does worry me. And even if it chimes with a lot of what people think in other parts of the country, it is ultimately about seeking to influence Canterbury City Council, and it's not about what people from maybe other countries or other organisations that aren't based in Canterbury might want. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor Steph Duke, please.
What's the difference between 3 people signing the petition once online and prior to the internet days, back before I was born, somebody signing on an A4 sheet of, you know, copy paper? 3 times, but with a different name or slightly different signature. If somebody's desperate enough to get their voice heard, that they're willing to set up an AI petition in Canterbury from, you know, Italy, I think we'd notice. But yeah, basically, what is the difference between 3,000 names on paper and 3,000 names on the internet? That's it, basically.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Let's appreciate that.
Yeah, I couldn't say another word. You know what I mean? You know when you get the, yeah. Also, I've set up a petition on Change and you get a report of who signed it. So specifically, you can find their postcodes that they've signed up with. So that might help to know.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. I've got Councillor House first and then Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. I take on board everything which has been said. Like all surveys and all questionnaires, there's going to be people who want to muck about and not take them seriously. There are people who are going to falsify them. There are people who are going to basically... I was a geographer, spent a lot of time doing surveys and questionnaires through my whole life. And the number of times Mickey Mouse has signed these things for me is ridiculous. Yeah. But we're giving the public a voice. We're giving the public an opportunity to put forward their points of view. And I think that's really important. I would prefer to go back to pre-Steph days and have paper petitions, because that way, yeah, just for the show of it, you can just stand here and wave them about, yeah, which is what we do. It's a game, isn't it? It's just, look at all these millions of people who've signed it. And I think it's important that we have the council petition, but we also look at other bodies who are making it possible to get these petitions up and running. So what I would like to see, and this is going to mean a bit more work, is that like any good practitioner of surveys, we have built-in feedback. So we trial it for a year, and Matthew and his team could actually look at some of these things which have gone for change.org or whatever, and see if they're falsified, to see if there are problems with them. And then if there are, next year at the governance meeting, this time next year, we can say, well, we tried it, it didn't work. Thank you, we're going back to how we always did it. That's what I would suggest. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turnbull.
Thanks. Similarly, yeah, I'm just thinking, Matthew, what sort of scale of problems have there been reported? Have you been getting feedback from members of the public that it's been a pain to have to go through the councils? Does that put people off? Instinctively, I thought, yes, open it up, because you know, it seems to be making it more democratic and more people can access it. But having listened to what people have said about those reservations, I'm beginning to think again. I did do a quick trawl through a few other councils this afternoon, having a quick look. And all the ones I looked at did actually require e-petitions to go through their system. So that seemed to be fairly standard practice. But one thing that did strike me was we could do with some really clear guidance, again, picking up on what Councillor Sol said, really clear guidance on what is required and what you have to do, because I think currently there is a bit of text on our website, but then there's a link through to the Constitution, and it's the whole Constitution, so you have to look through it to find that. And of course, a lot of stuff is council speak, and we need to sort of just interpret that council speak into something which is easy for people to understand. So yeah, I'd be interested to know what sort of scale of problem you think there is currently, if people have been getting back to you or Democratic Services with complaints about it. Thanks.
That's great. Okay. If I think you're the last person to want to speak, so I'll let you go first, and then I'd like Matthew to come back and just help us a little bit to work through package some of those.
No, I was just going to say I find it very strange that elected councillors are quite happy having several names that might be bogus on a democratic form, because it might be easier for the person who organised it, and perhaps they would like that come the next election.
Okay, Matthew, can you just sort of unpick where we are on some of this, and whether there is steps we can take, or whether we need to be decisive tonight and go one way or the other, really?
Thank you. I'll try and work through them all. Some really good points. Thank you. So on the first question about multiple people adding their name multiple times, we do actually validate the petitions that we receive. The requirement is to provide an address where you live, work or study within the district. So we know our own postcode ranges, and we have luckily some clever people with spreadsheets who can do the analysis and tell us whether that postcode is inside or outside. Sometimes people don't appreciate that it has to be the address where they live, work or study, so they might provide their home address and it might be outside. But nonetheless, that's our criteria and that's the one we measure against. We would also pick up through that same spreadsheet search any duplicate names and addresses, and certainly on recent petitions that we've reported linked to the governance reviews, we have picked up where there are duplicates and discounted the second vote or second signature. So we do pick those up. I think so that also addresses the second point about knowing whether they are residents of the district. Yes, that live, work or study requirement is within there. On the AI point, we do engage with the petitioner. So at some point, people might add names blindly to a petition that has been created by an anonymous person on a third-party site, and those addresses then are willingly submitted by the people signing it, not necessarily knowing who they are sending that data to. That's their risk. That's how e-petitions work. But from our point of view, I think we would at some point be engaging with the petitioner, and at that point, obviously, if there is anything suspicious about the way that it was created in the first place, that would come to light, and we would then be able to deal with it. On a list of approved sites and measuring the integrity of other sites, I do have an issue with that. I think we don't have control. We're not the data controller of those petition sites. And I think any form of endorsement on our part, therefore, carries risks. Some of those sites are based in the US, and that would then involve data transfer across to the US, which of itself is problematic. So us being seen to encourage people to submit data which is then going off to a third-party site in a different country isn't something that I would necessarily want to endorse. If people choose to do it, then that's obviously their prerogative. We do allow joint petitions, being paper and electronic, so long as the wording is the same. So we try and be flexible and allow people to submit through their preferred method. And you're right, the organisers of petitions do have those lists of addresses while the petition is live, and then they have that spreadsheet, obviously, to submit to the council at the end of the process. So that is obviously something that we could point out, but it might be perceived that we are somehow discouraging people to add their name to a petition if it's on a third-party site. I think in the end, it's up to people to decide for themselves if that's what they want to do. Obviously, some of those issues don't exist when it's restricted to the council's own petition site. So we obviously receive the data, we manage it, and it doesn't leave the country. One downside I would say about just asking about issues and concerns, obviously we've had a few issues with Issue Manager, which has meant that our petition site's been down for a couple of months. And certainly when, I would say for 95% of the time, no issues or concerns. We did have a moment, I'm going back a long way now, when we had the Westgate Towers petition, which had about 3,500 signatures. It's the biggest one that I've ever dealt with. We did have some technical issues with our system at that point, which was just down to our software provider. And there was a perception that somehow we were trying to make it more difficult for people to add their names to a petition as a result of that. So I'm not saying it's flawless, and having us as the only channel means that it's then incumbent upon us to make sure we have a site available for the people to use. I hope that helps. I don't think it gives you complete clarity, but it does answer the question.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've got Councillor Salt and then Councillor Carnac, please.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the checks and balances that we seem to have in place here that Matthew's talking about. And in the end of the day, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing is that we as a cabinet are asked to consider a petition. And if we end up having to consider lots of bogus petitions because of this, well, as Councillor Howes has said, we can change the rules if it's not working. So that's our fallback. But I think it's, I'd want to go forward with this. I don't want to stop it based on a what if without knowing whether that actually is a problem.
Councillor Carnac, sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sort of along very similar lines. I think when there's a hot issue that people are either really want to back or they're really annoyed about, then they tend to speak to councillors anyway. There will be councillors that they'll be talking to, and often then they'll talk to Democratic Services to agree wording. I think we just need to make it as easy as possible. That's why paper petitions are still so successful, because people just see a paper petition and they sign it. The thing of, seeing something while you're out shopping and getting annoyed and then going home and having to look up something online and signing it, it sort of takes it away a bit. And I think all the petitions since I've been a councillor, I mean, some of them have been a little bit difficult in terms of where you stand and on the policy that you're trying to create, but that's all part of democracy, isn't it? If you end up on the wrong side of the debate, that's just tough. But as Councillor Soul says, what's the worst that can happen? It can either be rejected by the council, it goes to Cabinet if there are only a small number of signatures, and then it's up to Cabinet to decide what they do. And if you do get over 1,000 signatures, which is actually a really big deal to do that, having been involved in 2 big petitions recently, that takes a lot of work to get that number of signatures, then that triggers a debate. What's the worst? We have a debate, it's not going to... It's not going to cause any damage to anyone, as Councillor Howe says. After a year, if it doesn't work, then change it. But I do think that those restrictions that came in, they've been a bit restrictive because, as I say, in the heat of the moment, someone says, I know some of the colleagues over there have got a petition at the moment to try and get this number 7 bus back, which is really good. But, when people want to do that, they're not going to say, oh, I've got to go through the council to do that. They might just pick up any old platform and do it. So I think, we need to work with that. We need to welcome the challenge from our residents on the issues that matter to them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is there any other points on that? Anyone? Sorry, I'm just conscious that we're not necessarily all united on that. Is there anyone wants to raise an amendment to actually force a vote on this particular issue? Yeah.
I don't want to raise an amendment, but I feel quite reassured by the responses to my question, and I'm particularly reassured by the idea from Councillor Howes that if this isn't working, if we find 12 months it's a bit of a disaster, then we can review it. And I think if we actually take a straightforward, okay, let's give it a go and see how it works, bearing in mind that we do need to ensure that it is district people that are talking, because we do want district people to talk. I don't want to put barriers in the way of district people talking, but I am also aware of the more national kind of splurges that you suddenly get, and that we shouldn't be overwhelmed by that kind of thing should it happen. I've got no reason for thinking it would happen, but then strange things happen in local government as well as national government all the time. So I would be in support of trying it at this stage.
That sounds quite reasonable. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I quite agree that, you know, the worst that's going to happen is we will have a debate about it, but I am concerned about officer time. You know, if this is vexatious, to say the least, you know, we could end up wasting a lot of officer time verifying details on something that may be AI generated, whatever. You know, I don't know how we would prevent this from happening, even if it in our own site, I suppose. But we could end up chewing into officer time on something which is, as I say, vexatious without realising it until some days into the process.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good comment. Yeah, can you come back on
I was just going to say, we could report back on that in 12 months' time and see if there's any issues.
Yeah, I think that's, we just pop that in the notes if we can. Yeah, that's really good. So, well, sorry about that. Well, I'm actually, sort of, before we move on to the final couple of fairly minor points, I think, but so this time when we look back and reflect on this and we vote on this, maybe at the end, we're all happy to give this a go, but we're all mindful that we need to give it perhaps a year's trial, and maybe to next, well, we can mark it roughly around the annual general meeting time, can't we, really, in realistic times and now, so that would be useful to do that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next bit then. Yeah, just wanted to check that we're all okay to vote on that. I mean, this, you know, that's fine. Good. So this one is an amendment to the carers allowance. Just any comments anyone wants to make on that at all? So in other words, we're just being consistent across the. Thank you so much. Let me see you soon. All right. Thanks a lot. Okay. Yeah. So the carers allowance, obviously, we're just making that the. I always get muddled up between the real living wage, isn't it? The real living wage, but foundation wage, which is consistent with our staff wages across the council, really. So, Matthew, can you just pick any bits I've missed on that one?
Yes, I mean it's a small amendment, I think, just to make sure that this allowance aligns with our policies across the council.
Any comments? Are we happy about that? Just a good piece of tidying up, really, isn't it? I think so. That's really good. And obviously, you know, to encourage that, you know, obviously, councillors do claim when they need to, and rightly so. Okay, number 4 is a piece of sort of micro housekeeping that I think I'll let Matthew just explain the nitty gritty of it. I've all read that, so sure.
Yes, the head of legal services has a delegated power to agree minor amendments to the constitution, so long as they're not actually extending the responsibilities of councillors. So anything that is a change arising from perhaps a restructure where there's a change in responsibilities, or a change in the law where we have to just amend the constitution to time with legislation, all of those are made under delegation. And then occasionally there are ones that crop up which are just in the grey zone where they're not extending responsibilities, but it's useful for you to be aware of them and to note. And so both of these really fall into that category. The first was just a minor amendment where we have delegated authority to enter into memorandum of understanding. We had an example recently where it was an external bid, and the agreement that came through wasn't headed up as a memorandum of understanding, but it meant the same thing in practice. And so we thought the better thing to do would be to just be clear that any agreements of that nature, whether worded as MOUs or worded slightly differently, fall into that category. And that would include agreements for bids or grant applications. And the idea is that it just smooths the path to accepting those bids and allowing us to proceed with projects. I think the particular example was the tennis court grant over on the coast. So that amendment is there for you to note. The other one is just around the licensing committee, and this was a piece of legal advice that we picked up from a forum that Democratic Services officers are on, about the need for separation in your licensing committee subcommittees. Basically, the functions set up under the Licensing Act are done through legislation, and it says you will have a licensing committee to perform that role. And then all of the other functions sit under council and are delegated to the licensing committee. So they arrive through a slightly different legislative path. And what we have to be clear on is where you have a subcommittee making decisions on licensing arrangements, it has to be separate from any licensing committee that you might choose to set up for anything else, be it caravan parks or camping sites or whatever else it might be. So we're just making a note of that in our constitution to make sure that we don't ever fall into that trap, because if you do, it could be the case that the committee is making an ultra vires decision, and we don't want to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So I think you're giving a written paper to our chair of licensing to make sure that he's fully understanding of those things. So thank you, Councillor Bland. I expect a 90% pass mark at the very least. Okay. So that's really good. Any comments on any of that? Because that is a note item, that last one. So we can go to the vote now. So we're packaging all of what we talked about, and a vote for now is a vote to accept those amendments and changes, and to note the final items that Councillor Bland is doing the paper on. So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Right, Councillor Baldock.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bland.
For.
For. Thank you. Councillor Buckman.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Carnac. Thank you. Councillor Carr-Ellis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dixie. Thank you. Councillor Howes has left the meeting. I'll have to note that for the tape, I think. Councillor Jupe.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moses. For. Thank you. Councillor Prentice.
For.
Councillor Soul.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Stockley.
For.
And Councillor Turnbull.
For.
So that is carried unanimously, 12 votes.
Thank you, committee. That was useful to work through those, and hope that I think we're all a little bit clearer on lots of those now. And it's good to look at our constitution regularly, I think, and to work through that. And we've done 2 meetings, and I appreciate the attendance of both of them. Thank you for the advice. And that'll all be put in place for the next council meeting, won't it? So the next council meeting would be voting to, in effect, accept what we voted for in these 2 governance committees this month. So thank you very much for that. So we appreciate that. What the date of the next meeting is? Next year. Unless we have a need to have one sooner, of course. So it's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, 25th of February, 2025. Okay. So there we go. It's a good job we all got phones now, isn't it? Ready to go that far ahead. So is there any other urgent business to be done in public?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you for that. And there's no reason to exclude the press or public?
No.
Thank you very much. In that case, I close the meeting exactly at 8 o'clock.